The Criterium was staged in conjunction with the Twin Rivers Festival, attracting a quality field of 35, headed by former Olympian and professional Eddie Salas. Several competitors backed up from last week's Commonwealth Bank Classic to take part, including local hopes Dean Jones and Nigel Perry. Held on a 1.5 kilometre course round Raymond Terrace, the event went for 45 minutes before a 3-lap finish. The field was broken up early, with Matthew Harron winning a point score for the first 3 laps. Jones, Nolan and Back then broke away from the remainder of the field, establishing a lap advantage. Nolan and Jones battled out the finish, the latter prevailing. Salas finished 5th, while Dave Wells was the leading veteran. Most will now contest another Criterium at Bullaroo tomorrow. Clubs from up and down the coast are attending the weekend carnival sanctioned by Surf Life Saving Australia. Under strict guidelines due to home beach patrols, clubs are being granted permission to contest the summer trials, having previously been restricted to winter events. Australian champions Nobby's minus state representative Brett Hawkins were among those in attendance, as were host club Tea Gardens Hawk's Nest, the state title holders. Another trial event will be held at Nobby's on January 29. In soccer, the Newcastle Breakers Summer Sevens got underway at Austral Park last night. As expected, the 7 games provided plenty of goals. Having won the Premiership and the knockout final, Highfields Azzurri are now chasing an unexpected 3rd title in 12 months and started their campaign by thrashing the Eagles. And today's windy conditions played havoc with the Hunter Valley Rifle Association's annual championships at the Stockton Range. This afternoon's long-range event, over 800 yards, was used in preparation for tomorrow's shoot, with marksmen having to allow 8 feet for the stiff northwesterly. As seen on NBN News last night, the former Great Britain coach was in a relaxed mood at Mascot Airport yesterday, looking forward to his first training session.
I'm not going to go in and start charging about and kicking anybody's arse. You know, I just want to sort of filter into the system and progressively try to build on what's already been established.
Just over an hour ago, Really attended his first club training session at Broadmeadow Racetrack. The Knights now into their 2nd week of daily sessions. After a brief chat with some of the senior players, football manager Robert Finch introduced the new first-grade coach. With that, trainer Ashley Jones then continued the squad's pre-season build-up with 4 1,600-metre canters around Broadmeadow. Really looked on intently his first official engagement, the Fijian Sevens tournament later this month.
Gathered on the original school site, students from Madawi's 2 primary schools joined with descendants of the town's first settlers. The settlement was known as New Glamorgan. Daniel James, a Welsh farmer, helped to establish the first school. His son Reese, one of the original students.
Most of them had 2 or 3 miles to walk to get to school because this was farmland then, and so the farms were fairly big. They were mostly orchards and dairy.
Today's honour went to Daniel James's granddaughter, 73-year-old Erica Murphin. The plaque has been positioned below 2 Norfolk pine trees that were planted a century ago. Today's event marking the beginning of a week of centenary celebrations.
The National Party members, including 7 government ministers, had gathered earlier in the day for a talkfest. But in the evening, it was dinner with the Premier, and the mood a little more light-hearted, especially with local member Wendy Machin about former Minister Wal Murray, who's due to retire at the next election. But there was no doubting the Premier was on the hustings, waxing lyrical about money for the much-needed dredging of Lake Cat-Eye and about the controversial new privately funded public hospital in Port Macquarie, opened less than a week ago.
And as each day goes by, each week, each month, more and more people in this region will recognise that first-class health care has been given. And it's been given about 10 years before there was even a chance if we had not gone the way we went.
Understandably, the effects of the drought were high on the list of discussion points, with the government offering a further $50,000 for a bore to augment Kempsey's water supply and a promise of continued help wherever it's needed.
Port Macquarie will not run out of water even if we're going to have a convoy of trucks bringing it in. That won't be necessary if we get some rain, but it is a crisis and we've got to all be sensible about the usage in the meantime.
Last year, the national title was held at Toowoomba in Queensland and next year at Launceston. But for the next 3 days, it's Port Macquarie's turn in the national sporting spotlight. And the course looks a picture despite the drought, thanks to bore water.
We have 215 men playing here today, Thursday and Friday. And there are 201 from interstate, with a particularly strong contingent from Queensland.
Competition on day one has been keen, with the early leader Tom Harding of the ACT firing a 77. Defending champion Jake O'Donnell of Queensland was back in the clubhouse at 10 over on 81 after 3-putting several greens. Last year's runner-up Earl Kerr from Murwillumbah fared better with the first round 78, as did Gordon Willing of South Australia. The second round will be played on Thursday and the final 18 holes on Friday.
It's rated as the worst ever drought, affecting not only the land and the livestock, but also the people.
Probably the most depressing thing is to go down the paddock every morning and see those poor bloody cows.
Proud farming families are calling for help.
Every day they're feeding stock, trying to keep them alive, but every day the stock keep dying. There is no assistance. Every month they have to go into the bank and borrow more money. They can't continue to do this.
The Scone-Merriwa district has had the driest year in more than a century, just 250 millimetres of rain. It's one of the crisis areas in the state, but federal government aid doesn't come through here. Yet, just a matter of kilometres away over that range, farmers do get support. Scone doesn't qualify as it hasn't been drought declared for 24 of the last 36 months.
Our area is in a desperate need. We are in a disastrous situation where we do need assistance. And assistance initially to put food on the table.
A questionnaire has been handed out to local farmers asking for details on income and stock losses. This information will be handed directly to Primary Industry Minister Collins, and it's hoped it will force a reassessment of the drought funding policy. 10,000 head of cattle have died in the region, 6,000 sheep. Animals dying of starvation, drowning in boggy dams. The federal government cabinet meets at the end of the month. Scone farmers saying this is their last chance of survival. They have nowhere to turn from here. Peter Ryan, NBN News.
"54-year-old Ashik Patel, the owner of this store in William Street, Tyers Hill, was still shaken after a man wearing a balaclava had threatened him with a knife and held up the store.
He told me, give me money.
Mr Patel says when he tried to stop him robbing the store, he was assaulted.
He kicked the proprietor in the leg and then reached across and took a small sum of money from the till.
The man is described as middle-aged and tall. It's believed he left the scene in a yellow sedan. Jane Anderson, NBN News.
The Pirates of Penzance is a musical about fun, love and the high seas. John English is the king of the pirates, joined by other stars of the stage, Simon Gallagher and Tony Lamond. The upbeat version of the Gilbert and Sullivan classic has captured the imaginations of people in Newcastle, with an extra show already added to its 11-day run. The Pirates will take over the Civic Theatre from tonight, with shows through to November 20.
While the situation in Port Stephens has not reached the extreme seen in Byron Bay, the community says it doesn't plan to take any chances next New Year's Eve. Problems with revellers have increased, calling for possible solutions including alcohol-free zones and greater security, which were discussed at a special forum today.
It only takes a handful of yobbos to spoil it for everyone. We're not going to tolerate that. The police are going to be very high profile, as is the community, and we're not going to tolerate bad behaviour in the future.
Last year, crowds in Nelson Bay swelled to more than 5,000. Police say 75 officers will be assigned to the area.
We're hoping that with the high police profile and presence that any trouble will be eliminated by the fact that people will see plenty of police around.
Local residents and Christmas holiday makers claim they suffer the most from alcohol-related offences. Pubs, clubs and hotels will be targeted. Not only will underage drinking laws be enforced, police plan to crack down on licensees selling alcohol to intoxicated patrons. But according to the hotel industry, it can't be made wholly responsible for drunken behaviour.
The public and I say from children up, have got to be educated in the fact of responsible consumption of alcohol. That's basically where the problem lies.
Melinda Smith, NBN News.
The committee inspected the Pasminco zinc smelter at Boolaroo this morning. Lead is produced as a byproduct of the process. It's known excessive exposure to it affects a person's intellectual ability. Concerns have been raised about the blood lead levels of children in the Boolaroo area.
We've been talking to them about the process of continual improvement that we've embarked on and our program of upgrading of the plant to ensure that we meet future environmental standards in the community.
The committee also visited Argenton and Boolaroo public schools. Yesterday, the state government released its long-awaited interdepartmental-led task force report. Jeff Hunter, who's a member of the parliamentary committee, says he wants the government to do more in the Lake Macquarie area.
What we need is an allocation of funds from the state government to ensure that remediation, that is a clean-up, a decontamination of homes and premises right through the area is undertaken.
The committee then held a public meeting at Lake Macquarie Council chambers. It heard a number of submissions from different organisations. These included health authorities, council and community groups. The parliamentary committee will hand down its findings by the end of this month.
We'll be able to come down with some very strong recommendations to ensure the best possible health scenario for our young people especially.
Jane Anderson, NBN News.
After weeks of negotiations, the deal has gone through. This building, once up for auction, is now part of the block the RSL has bought for future expansion. The present club that fronts Pulteney Street and borders on Queen Elizabeth Park has its limitations.
There was a shortage of members' facilities. We couldn't expand anywhere, but the biggest problem has been parking for our members, and it's very much restricted at the present site.
The new site consists of a vacant block and 5 properties. It's 3 times larger than the land the club is now on. The announcement of the relocation comes just weeks after money was spent to upgrade the existing club building. Renovations worth $1.25 million were made to the foyer, poker machine area and dining room. The club's secretary-manager says the money was well spent because it will be several years before the new club is built. He admits it's likely to have a considerable impact on the neighbouring aquatic club.
It probably will, but we haven't even really considered that at this stage.
Tracy Walsh, NBN News. The current stock feed mill is located in Pitt Street, Taree. 8 people are employed there full-time, but additional staff will be hired when the business relocates to the new 8-hectare site on Lansdowne Road. Larger facilities will allow for the introduction of stock feed pellets to beef and dairy farmers between Coffs Harbour and Raymond Terrace.
Whilst they've been available to farmers in the region, farmers have had to have sourced those from centres such as Tamworth. Now, the economics of freight across the range have basically constrained those products.
Plans for the $5.5 million complex include grain processing and storage divisions. The General Manager of the Australian-owned company says the mill is one of 3 in the state and productivity levels should be high.
Based on normal conditions, not drought conditions that we're currently experiencing, we're basing the output to be around 30,000 tonne.
The Greater Taree City Council will give the development application the final go-ahead next week.
17-year-old Paul Gibson in the shorts first entered the ring 5 years ago, and now he wants an Australian title.
Yeah, I want it pretty bad.
That's about as vocal as Paul Gibson gets, but you don't have to be loud when you can box like this. He came from Brewarrina in the state's far northwest 2 years ago to be coached by one of the state's most respected trainers, Deanne Short.
He's a beautiful infighter. His problem was he could get in there, but he couldn't get out. He'd get hit coming back out, so we had to teach him to box on the back foot, moving back, and now he boxes lovely. You know, he's a good infighter and he's a boxer as well.
She's already taken him to a state title. The next goal, the Australian Championships in Sydney in just over a week, where he'll fight the best 3 featherweights in the country. Paul already has the support of his fellow boxers in the gym, but he'll be boxing for the pride of his old hometown come fight night. And with this form, he could easily become the mouse that roared. Richard O'Leary, NBN News.
46-year-old Gary Peterson of Wakefield committed 25 sex offences against boys over the last 20 years. The offences began in 1973 when he was a scoutmaster, continuing until August last year. The charges against him include having homosexual intercourse, indecent assault and committing gross acts of indecency. The Crown alleged that Peterson met the children and their families through interest, community and charity organisations. In cross-examination, Crown Prosecutor Peter Barnett said to Peterson, "They entrusted their children in your care to stay alone at your house and you used those occasions to satisfy your own sexual desires." To which Peterson replied, "Yes." Peterson pleaded guilty to all 25 offences. In sentencing him, Justice Freeman took that into account and evidenced that as a child, Peterson had also been sexually abused. Justice Freeman sentenced Peterson to 10 years jail, his earliest release date 2001. For the victims who can't be identified, it's been a traumatic time. All just pleased the man they once trusted has gone to jail. Jodie McKay, NBN News.
The Natural Amateur Bodybuilding Association's Oceania Championship attracted 24 competitors from Australia and New Zealand, the Kiwis once again regaining the team's trophy. Bennett was one of several locals to impress the judges, winning the overall and medium tall class. Brad Seal took out his tall class, while Warners Bay's Marilyn Porsche was third in the Miss Figure Fitness division. Meantime, there was further local success in the third round of the East Coast Australian Barefoot Ski Titles on the Williams River. Port Macquarie's Tim Hassett's time of 16.03 seconds over the 350 metres was the quickest of the day, but the Unlimited Open winner was Gavin Hinks from Blackall's Park. CM's Brent Jervis was successful in the A-grade and Unlimited outboard. Brad Mabry, the juniors, the Central Coast Tim Lance at the Unlimited inboard, and Yvette Blackburn, also from the Central Coast, was the fastest woman. And in the state NACRA catamaran titles on Lake Macquarie, South Australia's Christine will start as one of the favourites for the Nationals later this month after taking out the 5.8 metre division. Local Steve Bruin won all 5 heats in the 14 squares class, while Queensland's David Elliott was victorious in the 16s.
A teacher all her working life at various centres throughout New South Wales, Huldah now lives at the Nala Retirement Village at Lake Macquarie with her husband Joe. In her early days, she often went camping with girlfriends at an Aboriginal sacred site, the Mutwinji Snake Cave to the northwest of Broken Hill. Marrying late in life, Huldah took her husband to visit the area and was so shocked at the desecration wrought by visitors that she was inspired to write her poem.
Rest then beside the mushroom rock. Close your mind again.